Hey, this is Ben from Zartman Rigging, and today we're going to do a 3-strand eye-splice. You can find instructions for that splice on my book, Modern Splicing, available on my web store. That splice and lots of others are in this book. But for now, let's try and do it in video form. I have this horror show of a polypropylene 3-strand rope that is not good for much other than instructive purposes. It's very stiff, it's curmudgeonly, it's cheap and horrible, but we're going to use it anyhow. The first thing to do is, before we start to unlay the end that's going to be spliced, we need to make sure that the rope can't unlay too far. And so I'm going to take this twine and put a constrictor knot back here. And a constrictor knot is essentially a clove hitch with an extra tuck taken behind the first part. Now I'm going to pull that clove hitch nice and tight, that constrictor, and that should keep my rope from unlaying too far. I'm going to trim the ends of that. Every rigger should have a ton of twine lying around. And now I'm going to unlay these strands. This rope is very stiff. It wants to stick together. Some 3-strand ropes, when you start to take it apart, the yarns will just come and twist it and go everywhere. Some of the newer nylon ropes are very loosely laid and they will go all to pieces. This stuff is stiff enough that I don't have to worry about that, but because it is starting to undo itself and I want to keep these together while I splice them through, I'm going to tape each strand. Now normally I don't color code my strands, but I'm going to do it for instructional purposes. Some people find it easier to keep track of the strands if there's different colors of tape. So this strand here, strand 1, is going to be red. It's going to be strand number red. The next strand will be strand number yellow. This is some really cheap, abominable tape that I got at Harbor Freight. It's good for this sort of one-time use purpose. I wouldn't use it for many other things. And then last of all, since I'm out of my Harbor Freight colors, I'm going to use some of this nice Scotch 3M88 silver tape for the third strand, the silver strand. We could call it the ghost strand. There we go. Tape nice and tight so the tape isn't baggy, it's not hanging off the end. It's just do a nice job taping. It helps later. Now, most rope these days is laid in such a way that to do this splice, you want to bring the rope around counterclockwise to form your splice. There used to be ropes laid opposite directions. Nowadays, they're really only laid in one direction. You bring it counterclockwise to start your splice, and all of the tucks of the berries, all the tucks, will go athwart or at 90 degrees to the standing picks. If you went the other direction, if we went clockwise, we would be splicing with the lay instead of against the lay. With the lay is a different method. It's for a different purpose. Sailmakers use it, but for the purposes of what we want, we're going to go counterclockwise. So what you do is you form an eye of whatever size you desire and pick a strand at random. Whatever strand is closest to the standing part, and we're going to take this strand and we're going to bury it under one of these. We're going to tuck it under one of these. The way to begin your tucks is to twist this a little bit to kind of open it up. And this rope being so stiff, I'm going to take a Swedish fid. The Swedish fid is really a great weapon. And I'm going to force that open. And then I'm going to take my first strand, force this open a little more. There we go. And push it through. I want to bring it all the way up tight. There we go. Now I have strand number gray tucked one time. Because this strand goes under this one, the next one, strand number red, is going to go over it and under the one next to it. There's a progression here. Each strand goes over one and under one in a pattern, and there's never a time that that pattern is broken. There's never a time when one tuck, one of these splice strands, goes under two of the standing strands next to each other. There we go. I just did that with my fingers to see if I could. When I do that, the twist in this gets squeegeed back towards the end of it, and I have to manage it a little more carefully. So something to think about. The Swedish fid prevents that from happening. Okay, so now I have strand number one is tucked under, and it comes out next to the strand which strand number two has tucked under. Now the smart student, the smart watcher, is thinking, aha, it's time to tuck number three. But no, if we don't tuck number three yet, but we tuck number gray, number one more time, it will be a lot easier to see where number three goes. So I'm going to dive in here again with my Swedish fid. I'm going to tuck number one a second time, going over the strand that number two went under and under the one beyond. So now I have strand number one tucked twice, strand number two tucked once, strand number three is flapping in space waiting his turn. Well, we're going to give him his turn right now, and the best way to see where number three goes is to flip the rope over, and you can see that strand number one is coming out here, strand number two is over here, and there is a standing strand between them. That standing strand is where number three, strand number yellow, wants to go under. So we'll attack this with a Swedish fid. Ha! And this is where we have to be very careful that we don't accidentally tuck number three with the lay. This is with the lay, but we tuck it against the lay. It looks funny. It looks like I'm twisting it around, curling it around in the wrong way, but it really is the right way. So now I have one strand tucked twice, the other two strands tucked once, and lo and behold, I have symmetry. Each strand is coming out of its own separate hole in the rope. So that's how I know that I started this splice correctly. Now the thing to do is to take any strand at random and begin the pattern or continue the pattern. And if I do them one at a time, I'm never going to get lost as to which goes where. So I'll take the ghost strand. The ghost strand obviously wants to go over this and under this. So I'll open that one up by twisting it. If you twist this too hard on some ropes, it will hockle, and that looks terrible. So try to avoid twisting it too hard. Okay, there is another tuck for the silver strand. Now, you don't have to keep these really close down. They can travel up the body of the rope a little bit and lie a little nicer. But now that I've tucked this one, you can see that this one wants to go over that and under the next. So here we go. The further you push the Swedish fid, the bigger of a channel it makes for the rope. And pull that tight. Sometimes it helps to just have a hook on the bench. Some people hang it up here, but it's all good. Bench is good. Okay, now I'm going to do the next one. You see, if I carry on too far with one of these, this little guy is going to get lost. But if I do one at a time in sequence, this one obviously goes over this and under this. And I know that not only because of this, but because this one is coming out here, it's going to go over this next. This one's going to go under it. Over, under, over, under. It's a monotonous pattern. But we like patterns when we're dealing with rope. Patterns have a logic to them. This rope is stiff. It's a fighter. Not every 3-strand rope is as curmudgeonly as this Polypro. Sometimes what you can do is take a hammer, beat the thing down a little bit, kind of help the splices pull along, or the tucks pull along, but it doesn't matter. Now, if this little thing starts getting in the way, we can take it out. Now, nothing is going to unlay at this point. Sometimes you just dig. There you go. Take that constrictor apart and carry on. Nothing to do but carry on. Once we've gotten the amount of tucks that we want, we will begin to taper. Modern ropes, sort of nylon, polyester, 3-strand, sort of have a standard of 5 full tucks before you start any taper, or 5 full tucks without any taper at all. Ropes with a little more friction like this, you can get away with maybe just 3 tucks and a taper instead of a full 5. Really tight ropes that squeeze each tuck tightly are obviously going to create more squeeze, more friction. And really, as far as splices go, most splices are about friction. They're about how many molecules are rubbing against each other, creating friction, unwilling to let go. Alright, let's just firm up our tucks here. There we go. So I've got, it's a pretty short splice, but for illustrative purposes, it will do. Now I'll just demonstrate the taper before you get bored and turn off this video. The way to do a taper is to take one and leave it behind, and then carry on one more pass with this one more tuck, and 2 more tucks with this one, and you'll see what it looks like at the end of it all. So, one more tuck with the ghost strand. And you see how all these strands kind of want to get ugly. You can remediate that slightly by sort of bending it around. Once the splice is finished and pulled on, these things all tend to even out a little more. So now I have one strand stopping here, the next one is stopping here, and they're kind of next to each other. We're going to bring this one up until it joins them there, and that's what's called a Frisco taper. Right, and then one more tuck with strand number red, and our splice is accomplished. pull that in tight. And there we go. So you see for the Frisco taper, the 3 strands are coming out, one beyond the next and the same sort of side of the rope. That is a legitimate taper right there. A lot of times the splice, you can pound it. A hammer is better than a fist. You can roll it. You can put it on the deck and roll it beneath your foot. And all those things help to even it out. I'm just going to tug these tightly. And then you could take a hot knife and cut these here. Or you could take a elegant, handsome Zartman rigging ceramic knife available from the web store and hack that off. Pretty close to the body of the rope. One more time. And there is the 3-strand eye splice.